It has been over 6 years since Mega Evolutions were cut from the franchise, but with the release of Legends ZA, they are finally returning. However, a lot has changed since they've been gone. And despite not being in either Sword and Shield or Scarlet and Violet, many Mega Evolutions have actually inadvertently benefited from changes that those games made. New moves have been introduced, abilities have been reworked, and which moves each Pokemon learns has actually changed a lot in these games. And because of that, many Mega Evolutions that were not so good before actually have a new shot at life. Of course, there's also a ton of new Mega Evolutions coming in Legends ZA, but that's not what this video is about. I went through and looked at everything that's changed for each of the Mega Evolutions non-Mega form, and there's a lot of really interesting stuff. So I want to talk about 10 of the biggest buffs to these Mega Evolutions that you might not even know happened. Now, normally for these top 10 lists, I like to order them from like least competitively viable to most competitively viable, but I'm not sure that makes so much sense here. So instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about these Mega Evolutions from the buffs that I am the least excited for to the ones that I'm most excited for. So let's start off with number 10 on my list, Mega Kangaskhan. Mega Kangaskhan is the single best Mega Evolution, which is part of the reason why it's the lowest on my list. Now, Mega Kangaskhan actually received a couple of nerfs since the last time that we used it, which is interesting, but not what this video is about. The main thing I want to talk about here is that the best Mega Evolution in the game got actually 2 major buffs. Actually 3. The first and second buffs are reworks to 2 of its abilities, Scrappy and Inner Focus. Both these abilities only exist in Kangaskhan's base form, but they actually have some real utility. Because Scrappy allows Kangaskhan to hit ghost types, you would sometimes delay a Mega Evolving Kangaskhan so you could use Fake Out on a Pokemon like Gengar. Inner Focus prevents Kangaskhan from flinching, meaning you can still use Fake Out even if your opponent has a faster Fake Out user like a faster Mega Kangaskhan. This is how these abilities worked before, and it was a reason why sometimes Kangaskhan would delay Mega Evolving. The buff is that, as of Generation 8, both Scrappy and Inner Focus prevent the ability Intimidate from lowering the user's attack stat. Intimidate was one of the only tools to slow down Mega Kangaskhan. This is especially relevant because a Pokemon switching in will happen before a Pokemon Mega Evolves. So if you switch your Landorus in on the turn that Kangaskhan, Mega Evolves, Intimidate will not work. This is a really big deal. And it makes the best Mega Evolution even better, but I'm not happy about it. The other buff is that we saw in one of the trailers for Legends ZA that Kangaskhan is able to use Power Up Punch again, a move that it lost access to in Generation 7 because it was so broken. The thing is, we don't know how Legends ZA moves will interact with like the moves that a Pokemon can learn in a main series game, and so it might not get Power Up Punch again, but I have a feeling that it will. Power Up Punch was one of the things that made Kangaskhan the single best Mega Evolution in Generation 6, and so getting it back again is a pretty big deal. Okay, coming in at number 9 is Blastoise. Now, I don't have that much to say about Blastoise, to be honest, because Blastoise really only received one major buff, which is the attack Shell Smash. Now, Shell Smash is a really good move. It does lower both your defense and your special defense stats by 1 stage, but in exchange, you get 2 stages of increased attack, special attack, and speed, which, if you're starting from no changes, is effectively doubling all of your stats. I was doing some research for this video, and it seems like this one move pool change has allowed Mega Blastoise to be one of the best Pokemon in many single battle formats, but I'm not as excited about it for doubles. The reason being is that when a Pokemon in the past has used the move Shell Smash and has, been successful, it's pretty much always held the White Herb item to reset the defense drops, which I think makes sense, but Mega Blastoise as a Mega Evolution cannot hold any item. Additionally, I think that the strategy is a lot worse in doubles because you can either use Fake Out to stop one Pokemon from moving, but then you'll take a big hit from the other, or you can use Follow Me, but then you have to worry about spread moves, and so it's actually a lot harder to keep a Pokemon alive who is lowering its defensive stats. And if you're going through the trouble of, using a support Pokemon to set up your Mega Blastoise, you then often are going to want to be attacking both of your opponent's Pokemon, which in Blastoise's case means it has to use either Water Spout or Muddy Water. Surf is traditionally not thought to be very good. And I think this is actually the specific reason why I'm not so interested in Shell Smash Mega Blastoise, why I'm not that excited about it. And it's because what I think makes Mega Blastoise really cool is its relatively uncommon ability called Mega Launcher, which powers up certain pulse type moves. So like Water Pulse, Dark Pulse, Aura Sphere falls into this category for some reason. There's a couple others as well. Fun fact, actually, this doesn't apply to Blastoise, but Heal Pulse, which is a move that heals your partner for 50%, gets the Mega Launcher boost. So if like Clawitzer, who gets the Mega Launcher ability, uses Heal Pulse, it will heal for 75% rather than the 50%. Anyway, I think Mega Launcher is like a super cool ability, and I don't think that Shell Smash Blastoise will be the best user of Mega Launcher, but it will increase its viability, and I think we will see strategies probably based around setting up Shell Smash Blastoise. Did you know that buffs aren't exclusive to Mega Pokemon and that you can actually get them too? Thanks to the sponsor of today's video, Raycon, there's a pretty huge power-up coming your way. Their essential open earbuds are bringing a brand new experience to on-the-go listening and are perfect for working, exercising, or even just chilling. I personally use them for running, and they're certainly boosting my speed stat, that's for sure. Without having to keep muting my earbuds to pay attention to what's going on around me, I can stay in the zone. They're super lightweight and really comfortable too, with the secure fit keeping them in place, letting me run with peace of mind. They also support multi-point connection, allowing you to get home from work or a run, and you turn your connection straight from your phone to your PC or laptop. Fun fact, I didn't realize this was a feature for a little bit, so I just thought that I was magic. Like I would come home from my run, and then all of a sudden, like it would just switch to my computer, and I thought that I'd been blessed, but no, it turns out that was Raycon. I've been super happy with the Essential Open Earbuds, and they've become a mainstay for my runs. Kind of like a held item that powers me up. Maybe it's kind of like a Mega Stone that turns me into Mega Wolfey. Who can say? If you too want to mega evolve your audio experience, click the link in the description box or go to buyraycon.com/WolfeyOpen to get 30% off the Essential Open Earbuds. That's buyraycon.com/WolfeyOpen for 30% off the Essential Open Earbuds. All right, Other Wolf, tell us about number 8. Okay, coming in at number 8 is actually one of my favorite Mega Evolutions, Mega Steelix. Now, Mega Steelix is not thought to be very good, generally, but I did bring it to a tournament back in early 2018, the second year of Sun and Moon, and I actually got, I think, top 16 with it. It was a pretty big tournament for the time. It might have been the biggest one ever at the time. Anyway, I really like Mega Steelix. I think it's really funny. It's not that good, but it's also not that bad. Like, you can definitely use it. I definitely used it for sure. The buff that Steelix gets is to its move pool. It gets 2 new moves. The first is High Horsepower, which is nice. Previously, Steelix, I think, had to use either Earthquake, maybe Stomping Tantrum, but High Horsepower is a lot stronger than both those moves in double battle context, and so, yeah, it's just like nice to have a better ground type attack. The other buff is it actually gets access to Body Press. Body Press is a pretty big deal, and it's going to come up again later. It didn't exist back in Generation 7, and so a lot of these Pokemon that really wanted Body Press didn't have access to it. Many of you probably already know this, but the thing about Body Press is that it uses the target's physical defense stat when doing damage rather than their attack stat like most other physical moves. And so for Pokemon with really high defense stats, it's actually something of a godsend. Body Press has a nice benefit as well, which is that normally to slow down a powerful physical attacking Pokemon, you could use Intimidate, unless that Pokemon is Mega Kangaskhan who hasn't Mega Evolved yet, but typically you want to use Intimidate. But since Body Press bases its damage off the defense stat rather than the attack stat, you don't have to worry about Intimidate if you're clicking Body Press. Now the thing is that I don't think that Body Press is the single most impactful move on Steelix. It does have a pretty decent attack stat, and like its ability Sand Force gives it a power boost in the sand, and so like for the most part I think you want to be using Steel and Rock and ground type moves with it. But this does open up another way for Steelix to be played. Maybe you can run Iron Defense with it. It's not a bad move to get at all, and like maybe it will see some play. I really like Steelix and I'm glad that it gets some love, but I don't think that this is enough to really increase its viability all that much. Legends CA is going to shake things up a lot with all the new Mega Evolutions and potentially new move pools and all the other changes to the Pokemon franchise. And if you want to be kept up to date and see which Pokemon are good, which Pokemon are kind of underrated, which Pokemon are popping off right now, just do me a favor and make sure you subscribe. Pokemon tends to move pretty fast, so I'm sure you don't want to miss anything as it develops. Anyway, coming in at number 7 is Mega Gardevoir. Mega Gardevoir is actually one of the better Mega Evolutions. It won the National Championships back in 2015, and I actually won a regional with a cool Imprisoned Mega Gardevoir set intended to beat other Mega Gardevoir. Mega Gardevoir is a special attacker that has a couple different roles that it can play. It will pretty much always use Hyper Voice because its ability Pixelate turns all normal moves into fairy type moves and gives them a damage boost to boot. And so it pretty much always tends to use Hyper Voice to spread damage around. But sometimes Mega Gardevoir will use this fast and frail special attacker, and other times it'll be used a bit slower and bulkier to set up Trick Room that can function both inside and outside Trick Room depending on what the circumstances dictate. The Mega Gardevoir also gets a buff to its move pool. Specifically, it gets 3 moves that I want to touch on. The least impactful is probably Mystical Fire. This isn't a bad move. It's a fire type attack, which is really nice for Gardevoir, whose Psychic and Fairy typing means that it can't really touch Steel types very well. And it also lowers the target's special attack stat whenever it hits something. This is a good move, but it's actually not that strong, and Mega Gardevoir being not that bulky and being specially bulky, so it doesn't necessarily need to drop the target's special attack, means that I don't think this will see that much play, but it will be an option that players can use. The second one's a bit surprising, and it's not the most powerful attack, but I personally think it could be really good. It's Vacuum Wave. Vacuum Wave is a weak, special attacking, fighting type move that has an increased stage of priority. Priority is a massive deal in competitive play, and fighting type special coverage is pretty rare. The thing is, this is such a weak move because Gardevoir's not a fighting type, and also like the move is just relatively weak in the first place. But being able to finish off a Pokemon with 1 HP or hit a Pokemon that is really weak to fighting for decent damage, I think is a pretty nice addition to Gardevoir's toolkit. The biggest addition though is the fact that Gardevoir now gets the move introduced in Sword and Shield, Expanding Force. Expanding Force is the strongest psychic type move, period. Well, not Light that burns my eyes, but in terms of like non-Z move, non-max move moves, it's the best. It's a Psychic type move, which doesn't look that extraordinary at a glance because it just seems like a worse version of Psychic, until you consider the fact that when Psychic terrain is up, this move powers up. Not only does it get a damage boost because Psychic terrain increases the power of Psychic type moves, but it gets an additional damage boost on top of that, and it goes from hitting only one of your opponent's Pokemon to both. It is such a powerful move that entire teams build their strategies around getting it off. As of Scarlet and Violet, there are two very good Psychic terrain setters in Indeedee and Tapu Lele, and so it's not impossible at all to set up Psychic terrain. Given that Gardevoir is already a very powerful Pokemon and a Pokemon that's seen success, I think this is only a buff to it. I would say that I am decently excited for this. I do worry that Gardevoir is at a power level where it might struggle to keep up with some of the newer Mega Evolutions now that we're going to have more in Legends ZA. I say this not knowing what the new Mega Evolutions are, but Gardevoir was already kind of like a second string Mega, and so if we have a bunch of new good ones, I don't know, I'm kind of worried that it won't keep up, and so I think this gives it the ability to keep up. That being said, I don't like playing against Expanding Force, but I also don't like using Expanding Force, so I'm not that excited about this generally, but I'm not excited either. I think this is totally fine, but Expanding Force is really strong and annoying to play against, so yeah, I'm not like thrilled about it. All right, coming in at number 6 is a Pokemon that saw basically no play before, Mega Alakazam. Now, Mega Alakazam is a Pokemon you might be surprised to hear that it didn't really see play before. After all, it's extremely fast and extremely strong. I think the big issue with Mega Alakazam, though, is the fact that it's very, very frail. This isn't like such a big deal in a vacuum. Other frail Pokemon have done well before, but I think the big thing about Alakazam is that it only has moves that can hit one of your opponent's Pokemon for decent damage. This is a pretty bad combination because even if Alakazam is picking up a one-shot, it's probably going down in exchange. And so having a Mega Evolution that goes down easily seemed like a liability, didn't see a lot of play. However, Mega Alakazam received a major buff to its move pool. The first is access to the move Nasty Plot, which gives it 2 stages of increased special attack, doubling it if it didn't have any changes to it before. There aren't that many Pokemon that can survive +2 Mega Alakazam attacks, and so this is part of solving the issue, right? Like, at least now if Mega Alakazam is able to get set up, if there's only one Pokemon on the opponent's side that can KO it, it will probably be able to finish it off before it can move. However, that doesn't solve the problem that if your opponent has 2 Pokemon that can KO Alakazam, it's going to go down in 1 turn anyway. Which is where the other buff to Alakazam's move pool comes in, because similar to Mega Gardevoir, Mega Alakazam also gets access to Expanding Force. This is much more impactful than Mega Gardevoir because Alakazam is faster and has access to Nasty Plot. So you can do something like Indeedee Alakazam, use Follow Me to keep Alakazam safe while you Nasty Plot, and then use Expanding Force to KO all of your opponent's Pokemon. Of course, this doesn't account for Dark or Steel types, but I mean, I think this is still a pretty major buff. To me, this is one of the most interesting Mega Evolutions to keep an eye on because, like I said, Alakazam basically saw 0 play before. And if anything was going to make it viable, this is probably it. Like, I think that it will see some play, I just don't know how good it will be in the long run. Like I said, I don't really love Expanding Force-based strategies. However, Alakazam I think is such an interesting case, and I can't help but personally root for it because it basically saw no play before. So if there's any Pokemon that I would like to see kind of take off, if there's any Pokemon I'd like to see be viable that wasn't viable before, okay, it's not Alakazam, but I'm rooting for it, okay? That's what I'm trying to get to. Okay, coming in at number 5 might be the single most impactful buffs on our list because the Pokemon receiving the buffs was already a great Mega Evolution before. It's Mega Metagross. Now, you might have thought that the Kangaskhan buffs would be the single most impactful, and they very well might be, but the thing is that Kangaskhan actually received a couple nerfs, which again, that's not what this video is about. Whereas Metagross, I think, didn't really receive any obvious nerfs to me, and so receiving some new tools could be a pretty big deal. Now, Mega Metagross in the past, I would say was like an A tier restricted. It tended to do well, it had a couple good performances at the World Championships, but it never won Worlds, and in general, it just didn't seem as good as some of the other Mega Evolutions like Charizard Y, Kangaskhan, Mega Gengar. Those are kind of the big 3. Oh, Mega Salamence. Oh my god, I forgot about one of the biggest ones. Those are the big 4, okay? Mega Metagross was kind of in this awkward spot where I think it's a really cool Mega Evolution because it really changes the way Metagross plays. It becomes much faster and much stronger. Mega Metagross played as this offensive Pokemon that it wasn't really getting one-shots a lot of the time because it just wasn't strong enough, but because it had really good bulk and decent defensive typing by virtue of being a Steel type, it was able to consistently put out good damage to your opponent's Pokemon. If it hit something for super effective, it was probably going to get the KO, and it was really hard to get rid of, and so it would kind of stick around for a while, outspeed a bunch of common Mega Evolutions like Kangaskhan and Charizard, consistently do damage, and eventually hope to win damage trades and finish off low HP Pokemon. And like I said, Metagross was already good, but it had some awkward things about its move pool, specifically its Steel and its Psychic type moves. I would say that Steel wasn't as big a deal. It got Iron Head, which gets the buff from its ability Tough Claws, which is good. It's a you know, respectably strong move. Not the strongest, but it does have a chance to flinch, which is really good. Its other option was Meteor Mash, but because it's only a little bit stronger, it doesn't have a flinch chance and can miss, players tended to not use it as much. The real weakness, though, was its Psychic type moves. Metagross just didn't get a good Psychic type move. Its best option was Zen Headbutt, which is not very powerful and also misses. And so players would use it, but it was actually, I think, one of the big things holding Mega Metagross back was the fact that Zen Headbutt was really unreliable. And like sometimes you'd be like, oh great, there's an Amoonguss, I'll just one-shot it. And then you would miss and get put to sleep and lose the game. And so many players actually would just drop the Psychic move altogether using moves like Ice Punch and Stopping Tantrum, but then you're, missing out on one of your, stab moves. It's not great, okay? Here's the thing. Metagross has been given arguably an upgrade to both its Steel and Psychic type moves. The Steel one is a little bit more contentious, like it's not necessarily a strict upgrade. Metagross got access to Heavy Slam, which is a move with variable base power depending on how much heavier the user is than the target. The thing is, Metagross is pretty heavy, and I guess it makes sense when you look at it. And so for a lot of Pokemon, it's going to be doing close to the maximum damage, which is a whopping 120. For context, that is 50% stronger than Iron Head. This is already a really strong move, but it also gets a boost from Metagross's Tough Claws ability, powering it up even further. I didn't mention this earlier, but it's also nice because Metagross as a physical attacker has to worry less about Intimidate because of its clear body ability. Similar to the Scrappy and Inner Focus abilities we talked about earlier, you can't intimidate Metagross in its base form. And so being able to suddenly Mega Evolve, get a huge speed buff, a huge power buff, and then launch potentially a 120 power stab move boosted by Tough Claws. I haven't run any damage calcs for this, but I imagine it's going to be doing a lot to a lot of Pokemon. The thing is though that you do lose the flinch chance, and of course against like other Pokemon that are heavy, you won't be at full power. Sometimes you'll be at much less power. So it really depends on what other Pokemon are legal and how many of them are really heavy. Metagross's Psychic move though, I think is just a strict upgrade. Metagross gained access to the move Psychic Fangs. Psychic Fangs is stronger than Zen Headbutt and never misses, and has the added benefit of breaking through Reflect, Light Screen, and all those other screen-based effects, which I say out loud, but I think is just Aurora Veil actually. Having a consistent Psychic type attack that never misses and also is powered up by Tough Claws is a really, really big deal for Metagross. And I think with these move pool changes, it's entirely possible that Metagross goes up from the A tier to like the A plus or the S minus, maybe even the S tier. It's a Pokemon to keep your eye on, and I would not be shocked at all if it was one of the best Mega Evolutions going into Pokemon Champions. The only reason that it's not higher up on my list is that it was already a good Mega Evolution before that saw play, and the Mega Evolutions that I'm personally more excited for are the Mega Evolutions that didn't really see much or any play at all, and now might actually have a chance. Which leads me to the number 4 Pokemon on our list, Mega Aggron. I like Mega Aggron. It's not very good, but I do like it. Here's the thing about Mega Aggron. They have spec'd this thing almost entirely into its bulk. It is so ridiculously tanky, and I mean, look at this defense stat. It's just monstrous. The problem is though that in double battles, it's not so good just to be super tanky. You have to be able to contribute. And while Mega Aggron can, use Heavy Slam for damage, or I don't know, can use Thunder Wave, it just doesn't have that much to do. It kind of just sits in the field and allows your opponent to play a 2 versus 1. In other words, it can actually end up being a liability. Or it could be a liability the last time it was legal, because there's been a change for Mega Aggron. It has gained access to Body Press. Additionally, Steel is the single best defensive type in the game, and Mega Aggron's ability Filter powers down all super effective moves. Being a pure Steel type is actually, I think, better here than being a Steel and Ground type compared to Steelix, because you just have fewer weaknesses, and with access to Body Press, Aggron is now able to be not only a defensive threat, but an offensive one. The main strategy I expect to see from Mega Aggron is something like Iron Defense plus Body Press, Iron Defense increasing your defense stat, Body Press then using that to do damage. It is hard for me to imagine even super effective damage doing much to a +2 defense Mega Aggron because of Filter, because of the base defense stat. Now Aggron isn't a fighting type, and so it's not going to be getting the same type attack bonus boost that it would get if it was a fighting type, but I'm not so worried about Aggron doing damage, to be honest, with Body Press. I don't think Aggron's going to be one of the best Mega Evolutions, but it was kind of borderline unusable before, and now it actually has a role that it can fill. We don't know what Pokemon are going to be in Champions, but I could see if it was paired with something like Sinistcha, who is, able to resist the ground and fighting moves that Mega Aggron is weak to, potentially even redirect them with Rage Powder. I could see it actually doing quite well with the healing from Hospitality, with the ability to set up. There's tons of other Pokemon that could work as well, but yeah, I think Mega Aggron is actually a Pokemon that we might see, which is not something I would have said prior to getting this move. Okay, before we get into the top 3, I want to talk about some honorable mentions. These are buffs that I don't think are going to be the most impactful, but I was still found when I was doing my research for this video, so I wanted to talk about them. Mega Garchomp gets Scale Shot. On the one hand, this is good in a vacuum because Scale Shot's a great move and it boosts your speed and does damage, and so Mega Garchomp's main weakness is that it's slower than regular Garchomp. This seems good in theory. The problem is that Scale Shot, number 1, can miss. Number 2, it only hits 4 or 5 times if you give it the loaded dice item. And so you might be, using a 50 base power move some of the time that can also miss. Doesn't seem super good. I wanted to mention it. Charizard gets Weather Ball, which is a big deal because previously Charizard had to use either Heat Wave or Overheat, or I guess Flamethrower was an option as well. Weather Ball seems cool. It is better than Flamethrower because it's slightly stronger, but also it relies fully on the sun. I don't think it's like the most impactful thing. It also gets Scorching Sands, which I don't think is the most impactful thing. So I don't know. Interesting buffs. Don't think it's going to be a huge deal. Mega Venusaur gets Earth Power. I don't think this is going to be that big a deal because typically Mega Venusaur plays more like a defensive Pokemon using moves like Leech Seed or Synthesis or Sleep Powder, plus, you know, Giga Drain and Sludge Bomb normally as well. So I don't think it really can fit Earth Power very easily because it tends to be this Drain Tank Pokemon rather than an offensive sweeper, but it is a new move for its move pool. Mega Swampert gets Flip Turn. Now, I don't really believe that this is going to be enough to make Mega Swampert the most viable, but it was somewhat viable before just because Swift Swim in the rain is really, you know, strong. I think the biggest thing for Mega Swampert, though, is whether it gets access to Wave Crash. If it gets Wave Crash, I could see it being much stronger because otherwise it has to use either Waterfall or Liquidation, which just aren't the strongest moves. We'll see. Mega Medicham gets Close Combat. I don't love Mega Medicham, but I did have to play one in the finals of North American Internationals back in 2019, so it was a Pokemon that, while not popular, was usable at the very least. In the past, though, it had to use High Jump Kick, which is just like the biggest downside if you attack into Protect or you miss. Now it gets access to Close Combat, which I think that might be new. I don't think it had access to Close Combat before. I was like, why don't I remember? Like, I played it in the finals, and then I remember that I one-shot it both games. Like, it didn't get to attack either game. Rayquaza just ate it for breakfast. So I don't know, maybe it already had Close Combat. This makes it easier to use, though. Mega Gyarados gets a bunch of new moves, including Temper Flare, Lash Out, Scale Shot, and now as a Dark type, it's immune to Prankster. The thing is, the reason I didn't include these moves is that while they are like good and they might have some niche applications, for the most part, Mega Gyarados wants to run Protect, Dragon Dance, Waterfall, and then either Earthquake or Crunch, and so I don't think it really easily fits any of these moves, especially given that these aren't like tier 1 moves by any means, but I wanted to mention them here. Mega Gengar gets a bunch of new moves. A couple that stand out to me are Acid Spray, which can cut the target's special defense in half and combo with a powerful partner. It also gets Nasty Plot, which allows it to set up, which I don't think that Mega Gengar normally will have the time to set up, especially because it doesn't have a spread move, but it's worth noting that you could use Nasty Plot Mega Gengar now. And the biggest one is Encore. Having a super fast Pokemon with Encore and Shadow Tag could be extremely mean, especially because Gengar also gets Disable. Mega Gengar gets a ton of disruption moves, including Taunt and Will-O-Wisp, and so I don't know how easily it will be to fit Encore, but given how good Encore is, like, I certainly wouldn't be surprised at all if it saw a good bit of play. Personally, I'm very excited for Encore Mega Gengar, though I don't know, again, if it'll be easy to fit it onto sets, but yeah, I mean, I don't know. Mega Gengar is my favorite Mega Evolution, and so getting a ton of new moves is very exciting for me personally. I think because I'm biased about it, I can't tell exactly how good Encore will be generally, but I do think that it will continue to be one of the best Mega Evolutions, even not knowing what the new Mega Evolutions are. We'll have to see if I eat my words. Okay, we're into the top 3 now. These are the 3 that I'm the most excited for. All 3 of these Pokemon are Pokemon that, like, while they saw a little play, they were never considered to be especially good. I think at best, they're probably in the C tier, and at worst, they're a little bit lower. But I think with the new buffs, they could see a little bit more play, if not a lot more play. Coming in at number 3 is Mega Abomasnow. Mega Abomasnow is a Pokemon that, in theory, should have been pretty good. Like, it's a really, really slow Pokemon that works as a Trick Room attacker. Blizzard is a broken attack because you can freeze both your opponent's Pokemon. Seems really good. The problem is that while Mega Abomasnow was intended to be this slow and bulky, like, Trick Room attacker, its awful defensive typing means that in actuality, it's just not that bulky. Like, you can try what you want, but like, because it's quadruple weak to fire, it's weak to rock, it's weak to steel, it's weak to fighting, it's weak to bug, it's weak to flying, it's weak to poison. There might be others that I forgot about, honestly. It's really hard to keep it alive, and so it didn't see that much play. However, Mega Abomasnow received a pretty major buff because the Hail status condition has been changed to Snow as of Scarlet and Violet. Now, rather than damaging all Pokemon on the field that aren't Ice type, which is all Pokemon that aren't Mega Abomasnow most of the time, it instead increases Mega Abomasnow's defense stat by 50% when the snow is up. We actually saw that this made regular Abomasnow have some play and was actually a viable Pokemon in some of the earlier regulations of Scarlet and Violet, and Mega Abomasnow has much better stats than base Abomasnow. It doesn't like fully remove the fact that it has a ton of weaknesses, but it does make it slightly easier to keep Mega Abomasnow around. And in general, having a Pokemon that sits up the snow and then can click Blizzard, like, you want to get rid of it as fast as possible because otherwise, inevitably, you will get frozen. Mega Abomasnow also got a move pool buff, which is that it now gets access to Aurora Veil, which is an incredible move, which is both Reflect and Light Screen, but you can only use it when the snow is already up. I don't know how impactful this is going to be honest, because typically Aurora Veil users prefer to be faster, and they almost always prefer to hold Light Clay so that you get like 8 turns of duration rather than only 5. And also, like, Mega Abomasnow already has 4 moves that it wants, which is typically Blizzard, Protect, typically a grass move like Wood Hammer or Giga Drain, and then the last move is normally Ice Shard because priority is really good and Dragon types are really good. I don't know for sure that it will be able to fit Aurora Veil, but you at least have the option now. I don't think that the change to Snow is going to make Mega Abomasnow like instantly overnight, you know, S tier viability, but I think it could see more use now, and I think overall this is a really good change that could make it easier to use. Okay, coming in at number 2 is a Pokemon that I almost never talk about, actually. It's Lopunny. Lopunny? I always called it Lopunny. I think I'm gonna yell at for that. Anyway, Lopunny got two pretty major buffs, one to its ability and one to its move pool. It's worth noting that Lopunny isn't a bad Pokemon. I did play one at an international tournament back in 2019. Mega Lopunny is both faster and stronger than Mega Kangaskhan, which sounds pretty good. However, its ability isn't as good. It doesn't give it a huge damage boost, and also it's frailer, and so most players preferred Mega Kangaskhan. However, on certain offensive teams, Lopunny's secondary fighting typing and the fact that it's faster and stronger, it saw a little bit of play, not a ton. However, Mega Lopunny has now received a buff to its ability. And in some ways, it's similar to Kangaskhan because it shares an ability with base form Kangaskhan, but in other ways, it's different because it's the ability it has after Mega Evolving, not before. Mega Lopunny has access to the Scrappy ability, which allows it to hit Ghost-type Pokemon with its fighting and normal-type moves. This meant that it could use, fighting moves to KO Aegislash back in the day. However, as you might recall, as of Generation 8, Scrappy prevents the user from being intimidated. This is actually the opposite problem that Kangaskhan and Metagross have. Now keep in mind this is only the ability of the Mega form, and so you are able to intimidate Lopunny before it Mega Evolves. However, unlike Kangaskhan and Metagross, once it does Mega Evolve, it becomes completely immune to Intimidate. In addition, Lopunny used to not get any good fighting type moves. Similar to Medicham, it kind of had to use High Jump Kick or weaker moves like Drain Punch. Kind of lesser of two evils here. You either, lost half your health if you missed or attacked into protect, or you just didn't get any KOs. However, also similar to Medicham, it now gets close combat. Between the buff to Scrappy and the addition of close combat to its move pool, I think it will see more play. It partially depends on what the good ghost type Pokemon are, because Scrappy is used in part because it does allow Mega Lopunny to have effectively no switch-ins, right? Like you can have close combat, and if your opponent doesn't have a poison or a flying or a bug type Pokemon, which aren't always the most common types, there's basically nothing that can switch into it. Because Lopunny is so fast and so strong, and because Scrappy basically allows it to hit types that it normally wouldn't be able to hit, if you're able to keep it alive to a mid or an end game position, you can often end up in a position where your opponent just doesn't have any switch-ins. Fighting is one of the best offensive types in the game, and so sometimes players will plan their game plans around using their ghost type to beat fighting or sometimes normal type Pokemon. And so the fact that Lopunny can just ignore that game plan and invalidate it is a pretty big deal. I don't know for sure how good Lopunny will be, but I suspect that it will be used at least a little bit because this is actually a really unique kind of toolkit that it has access to, and I think that on the right team, it can actually do really, really well. If it was in D or C tier before, I could see a world where it moves up to B tier. Again, a lot depends on the other Mega Evolutions, but I think that Lopunny has much more of a chance now than it ever did before, which only leaves the number one Pokemon on my list, the Pokemon that I am the most excited for and the buffs that they've received, Mega Slowbro. First of all, I love Mega Slowbro. I tend to like the really goofy Mega Evolutions, and I think Slowbro certainly falls into that category, but I also think it's a really interesting Pokemon. Now, full disclosure, I basically never used Mega Slowbro, though it did see a little bit of use back in the day. Mega Slowbro is interesting because it's a super defensive Mega Evolution with a really cool ability called Shell Armor, which prevents it from getting crit. This might not sound very exciting, but it allows Mega Slowbro to do something that other setup Pokemon can't, which is actually play slow without fear of being crit. Normally, the weakness of a Pokemon that's just, boosting its defenses forever is that the more you attack it, the higher the likelihood is that eventually you will crit it. Crits ignore stat boosts, and so, if you have +6 defense, Registeel, and then all of a sudden close combat critical hits, you're probably losing that Mon. But with Mega Slowbro, you don't have to worry about that. So what buffs does Slowbro receive? Well, they're pretty much entirely based in its moves, unless I've missed something. Mega Slowbro gets access to Body Press. Mega Slowbro already had access to the move Iron Defense. So, Mega Slowbro is a Pokemon that can boost its physical defense and cannot get crit, and can then use that physical defense to do damage. In the past, when players tried to use setup Mega Slowbro, the problem was, although they got really tanky pretty quickly, the opponent would just KO all of Mega Slowbro's partners, and then it would be really awkward because, yes, Mega Slowbro was really tanky, but the problem was it was often fighting 1 against 4. And although it could, do damage over time with Scald and try and wear things down, oftentimes it just didn't do enough damage to actually outpace the opponent. Now though, after a single Iron Defense, it's gonna start doing really real damage. Maybe now it would be okay to just get 1 Iron Defense off and then start using Body Presses. You could train Mega Slowbro to be very specially bulky, it's already extremely tanky, and after an Iron Defense, you'd get so much physical defense. This alone though isn't the only thing that I'm excited for with Mega Slowbro. It gets the new move Psychic Noise, which stops the target from healing after it's been hit. I wouldn't say it's an incredible move, but it can be really good on a more support-oriented Psychic-type Pokemon, so I think it's worth mentioning. But the big move that it gets is similar to many of the other Psychic-type Pokemon on this list, Expanding Force. What's interesting about Mega Slowbro is that, despite being very tanky naturally, it also has a good special attack stat. I could see a world where Mega Slowbro actually becomes this hybrid Trick Room attacker, where you use it to set Trick Room because it's so tanky and can't get crit, but then once you're inside Trick Room, you can use moves like Expanding Force, maybe Scald. It actually gets Flamethrower, so it can hit Grass-type Pokemon, as well as Steel-type Pokemon, which would resist, the Psychic moves. And I can see it being this bulky Pokemon that actually is also able to do damage, which is a personal favorite archetype of mine. I don't love psychic terrain based strategies, but I do like a bulky Trick Room setter that also does damage. I think that Mega Slowbro could be one of the higher skill Mega Evolutions to use as well, because before it Mega Evolves, it gets Regenerator. So if you think you're going to switch out in the next turn, you could actually delay Mega Evolving, set Trick Room up, and then switch out, and then Mega Evolve later in the battle. I think because base Slowbro is actually a pretty decent Pokemon as well, I could also see a world where you use it as like a secondary Mega Evolution, where maybe you have like a more traditional offensive Mega Evolution, but you have the stone on Slowbro, so you have the option if you don't want to bring it or if it's a better position for it. I don't know. I think it seems like a really interesting Mega Evolution. I don't think it's going to be S tier, but a good B tier Mega Evolution, I do love. I am a sucker for those guys. And I think there's a lot more that Mega Slowbro can do now than it could before, and it was already not so bad before. Anyway, that's my list. I didn't mention every single Mega Evolution that got a buff because I wanted this video to be a reasonable length. I just wanted to talk about the ones that I was the most excited for and I thought were the most impactful. But of course, it's also worth noting that things might change going to Champions. I think if anything, they might get access to more new moves or maybe an ability rework or two here and there. So we don't know for sure what's going to happen, obviously. Anyway, if you like this video and you want to see more content of me talking about other Mega Evolutions or the new Mega Evolutions coming in ZA, make sure you subscribe. We'll be talking about that within the near future. And if you like this video and you want to learn more about which Mega Evolutions were good or bad, check out this video I made on the 10 best Mega Evolutions.